Okay. Yes, I think so. Did you get that, Alfred, that we're going to record it? Because
Yes.
we have here we have people that have Norwegian as a main language, and we have someone who's Italian, we have someone from Poland, and we have someone who's German. And yeah, so it's nice to be able to make a version with subtitles so that everyone can understand. Okay, anyone else with questions? Just introduce yourself.
Hi, Alfred. My name is Vidar. I'm wondering, what's your very best advice regarding the role as a permaculture teacher?
Gosh, another good question. Perhaps find what gives you the most motivation and passion as a permaculture educator, and really go with that. And perhaps avoid trying to force yourself to do things, or put your passion, your time and energy in what flows for you, in the direction that really works for you, and perhaps let go of, or don't put so much emphasis on aspects of teaching that don't motivate you. So for example, while it's true that permaculture is incredibly multidisciplinary, and on a typical permaculture design course, there may be 40 major topics in that course, and there's very few people that actually can master teaching 40 different major topics. And actually, Bill Mollison once said to Rosemary that he thinks a permaculture design course teacher, there's maybe 1 in 400 people who would have the capacity to do it. So then, if maps are not your passion and are not teaching cartography, teaching map reading is always giving you stress and hesitation and so on, especially when you're getting going, no need to focus on that. Focus on teaching the things that really are moving you, such as forest gardens, or it might be bioconstruction. And I say this because in a recent course, I had a student who was saying to me that they felt like they couldn't be a good permaculture teacher because they really don't read maps very well. And so then they felt that they weren't going to be an adequate permaculture teacher. And it was a source of stress and internal conflict for them, really. And so my suggestion was, that's okay, because on the PDC, it's important to have multiple teachers, and those multiple teachers can each have their specialties. And a well-designed course, the different teachers can teach their specialties, and it works together harmoniously. I suppose that would be my best advice.
Thank you.
Yeah, or maybe one more, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I know something that over the years that I've heard of many times is people asking, how do I get started? How do I just don't feel ready to teach a PDC. I don't feel ready to charge money. Um, and this was certainly something that I felt right after my teacher training. And so what I would say is that there are 1,000 ways to begin teaching permaculture that don't require you to be a PDC teacher, or don't require you to be charging immediately for your work as a teacher. And actually organizing free events as you're practicing different teaching methods, as you're building a reputation, as you're making connections, is just such a great way to start. Because what I've found, and what I've also seen, is that if you organize a free permaculture event, as you're a beginning teacher, and you're passionate about your subject, people are very generous and forgiving if you make mistakes. And the opposite is also true. If you're charging on a more formal course, like a permaculture design course that has certification, and you're not ready, people are not so forgiving. So I really encourage people, especially after a teacher training, to just go out there and just start doing things. Because of course it will be difficult to right away necessarily be ready to be teaching and to be making income and having a career right after a teacher training. Some people may depending on their previous experience. But what I think is much more common and much more interesting is for people just to yeah, organize different events and collaborate with other people, be apprentices with pre-existing teachers. And so don't let the pressure get to you at first of, oh gosh, am I ready to be a PDC teacher? Or oh goodness, am I ready to charge? Am I professional enough? If you don't feel it, no problem, because really there's just a thousand things you could do, such as organizing a permablitz. Jen, is that a recognizable term in Norway, or is there another term for permablitz?
I wonder if it's jargon.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can explain it, or does someone know?
No.
Yeah, Daniel,
Yeah.
do you want to pass the microphone?
So shall I explain what is how do I understand that?
Yeah.
So for me, the permablitz is where people, group of people, have gathers in one place and do a lot of stuff connected with permaculture. So if the aim is to build something, everyone just gather and build that what we gather for, and this is actually that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, for example, if someone wanted to have a garden, then there could be a permaculture designer or several people working together to prepare a good design, prepare the tools and materials, and have a plan for depending on how many people will come to that permablitz. And then on a Saturday or a Sunday or some other vacation day, people come, they get involved, there's clear instructions on what to do, and people have such a great time and then have a really nice meal together, which is very, very important. And so if you were a beginning permaculture teacher, if you were organizing and explaining, and then after lunch, after a nice meal, you could then do a workshop on permaculture garden design, or natural building, or worm composting. And really, if it's well planned, it's hard to go wrong, because really people come there with a lot of enthusiasm, and really what we're growing in permaculture, I believe that a lot of what we're growing is not so much just food, but we're actually growing community. A permablitz is one way to do that, but it's also one way that you as a permaculture educator have a great opportunity to, again, imagine organizing a work morning. Everyone has a great meal together, and then you have a time for 2 hours to teach something that you're passionate about. What a wonderful way. What a wonderful way to practice maybe a new teaching method or a new subject that you've never taught in public before. It's a way to build community and build your reputation. And there's so many things like this that I think we can really take advantage of within permaculture, aside from the pressure of being a teacher in a certified course that is for which money is being charged to the participants.
Yeah, actually, it came to my mind that Norway have also term similar to it, because there's something like dugnad, isn't it? So we can figure it out. Permadugnad, okay, something. So here, there you go.
Yeah, super. And of
Yeah.
course, oh, go ahead.
Okay, anyone would like to ask a question?
Hello, Alfred. I'm Christine. I was wondering, could you say a little about teaching permaculture in multicultural groups?
Hmm. Sure. So what I have observed over the years is that in permaculture, I would say that we are generally quite good at identifying ecological microclimates. With what we learn through permaculture, we can analyze um, humidity, temperature, orientation to the sun. There are so many skills that we learn in permaculture. However, as with much of society, we're not very good at identifying what I would call social microclimates. We don't have we have comparatively strong ecological design skills and comparatively weak social design skills or social observation skills. And so what I find is that in teaching in a diverse social or cultural environment, it's challenging. First of all, it's challenging, and that one thing that we can do is to really try to do a good design of the the learner profiles of the people that we'll be teaching to or teaching with. So this is of course is one exercise in the teacher training is about developing a learner profile, which is really important with more diverse groups because I'll give one example of why this is important, and then I'll also share something of why I find that teaching in more diverse groups is enriching, is a powerful experience. But for example, early on when I was teaching in Barcelona, I was organizing a garden day in which kind of like a permablitz actually, but people were invited to come one morning a week and garden, and then we would eat together, and then we would have an informal class about something. And in the beginning, so there was a diverse group of people, and there was also a group of three women from Morocco who had only just come to Spain maybe a few years before. And so I was really enjoying the fact that there were people from different parts of Europe and Africa and Asia all working in the garden together. And then at one point, the women from Morocco stopped coming. So after a few weeks of them not attending the garden session, I called one of them and said, "Hey, I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. Is there anything that happened that for why you're not continuing to garden with us?" And she said, "Well, I really thank you for calling. I've really enjoyed the gardening, but lately some of the young men have been gardening without their shirts on. You know, on hot days, they're taking off their shirts and gardening, half naked from the waist up. And if our husbands found out that we were in that environment, it would be very, very problematic for us." So that's one example. It's a dramatic example of how I hadn't done really a learner profile and really had seen the entire social microclimate. It was something I was oblivious to and didn't think about. But there are 100 other examples of how we can either be that if we investigated more and became aware of the cultures, the backgrounds, the ages, the responsibilities, the religions, and so on of the people that we're teaching, then we can make sure to meet their learning needs and not inadvertently, not without, of course, not without the intention to push them away, but that can happen, and it can happen a lot. And so for me, it's also a lifelong learning process of learning about people, and especially where I live right now, I'm in Barcelona. There's just people from everywhere around the world here, and for me, it's enriching. It's a thrilling experience to get to know different cultures, different people, what are their needs, what works for them, what doesn't. Even things such as For some cultures, looking into the eyes is a sign of respect. And in other cultures, it can be aggressive or it can be a sign of disrespect. But being in these multicultural environments, I just find very enriching. And and though it is challenging, it is for me what I want, something that I want to be doing. I enjoy it. I like it. I learn a lot from people. Now, I always notice how if I'm teaching permaculture principles, something I try to do is give for each principle an ecological example and a social example. And often I'll give an assignment to the participants to for them to come up for each principle with an ecological example and a social example. And it's fascinating how it's so much more difficult to come up with good social examples of the permaculture principles. And I would say that 80% of what we do in permaculture probably is much more focused on the first ethic of permaculture, care of the earth, than it is on care of people or on fair share and future care, however we want to define the third ethic. So then this leads me to believe that, for example, when we think of the Holmgren principle of integrate rather than segregate, it's easy, relatively easy for us to imagine in agriculture the benefits of integrating cereal grains with fruit trees, with nut trees, with animal rotation, and so on. But it's much more complicated to think about how to integrate people from different cultures instead of segregating them. And so one thing I also feel very conscious about is I think that the future of Europe is migration. It's clear if you look at the birth rates in most Western European countries. I'm not sure about Scandinavia, but I'll talk about Western Europe. The birth rates are really declining. And so to maintain a society that where taxes are paid, hard work is done, and an infrastructure is maintained for people who retire, are elderly, and need care, we need migration. So where I'm going with that is that with permaculture, what I would like to try to be a part of is recognizing that there is value in working in multicultural environments, but not only can it be enriching to one personally, that is our future. At least in the southern part of Europe, is we need migration in order to maintain the services and the structures of society and the tax base that we've built. So then now, what can we do now so that these people who are coming here and coming here with a desire to work and to integrate in my little world of permaculture, what can I do to help facilitate that process so that there's a positive integration instead of a negative segregation? So
Thank you.
that was a long response. If you want to have a follow-up or anything more specific, I'm happy to.
If you want, anyone wants to come closer or wants to move, it says. Yeah, do you want to pass to someone else? Could I have someone who would be able to, film clips of this, or pictures, and then one's got a phone available? Then we've got a phone, doesn't know.
Yes.
Yeah. I have another question, Alfred. It's Daniel back here. Looking back at yourself as at the beginning, as you as a beginning teacher, what would you stop doing earlier?
Hmm. Jen, your students are asking such good questions. Um, and profound questions, not just like what's the weather like outside your window, but actually really profound questions. Hmm. Well, I think that I would I would have if I could do it again, or I would encourage perhaps, especially start getting started as a permaculture educator. In my case, I think I was trying, or I was too much of what could be called a radical generalist. What I mean is that I tried to teach too wide of a range of topics. And I wish that I would have focused more specifically on a handful of topics. So this is kind of coming back to the previous question. So for example, what I'm really enjoying and I feel just passionate about and that things are really flowing well for me right now is focusing on social and urban permaculture. And there are different reasons for that in my case. Um, but if I was a different person, it could be forest gardening, or it could be permaculture gardens. It could be social economy. It could be natural building, ecological architecture. There's so many more specialties, and I think that one thing that maybe I would change if I could from when I really got started teaching is I really thought that I should be teaching all 40 major topics in a PDC, and that's an important thing to do. And sure, maybe for some people they can do that, and it's good to do that. And I think we should all, of course, have some basic knowledge of the whole permaculture design course core curriculum. The idea of a core curriculum being that curriculum would be taught anywhere in the world, whether it's Norway, rural Norway, or a favela in Sao Paulo, Brazil, or a university in Oxford. There are different permaculture organizations have their own core curriculums. And so I think, of course, it's important that we have some working knowledge of all of that. But as teachers, and I'm reflecting on your question in my experience, is I think that I spent too much time at the beginning trying to mm, really develop deep skills and knowledge in the whole core curriculum. But in a way, it actually was kind of disempowering, I would say, for 2 or 3 years, because there's just so much. And how can we generally be really to in Spanish we would say dominate those subjects. I don't like that verb, so I'm looking for a different one in English. But like, it's really it's just it takes years and years and years and years to really study and have practical experience. By contrast, having four, five, six of those core topics that you really can dive deep into and then can teach, I think can be a much more empowering and agile way of starting out as a permaculture educator.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, I have a question.
Hi, Alfred. My name is Lena. I was wondering, do you have any tips on how to diffuse a tense situation? I'm not
Ah.
sure if it ever happens in permaculture teaching settings, but if they do, how can we?
Oh, yes, they do. Um, okay, let's see. And would you want to share an example or a little bit more information about what kind of tent setting, for example?
Well, I don't have a particular setting in mind, but I can imagine, or at least I think it's challenging when people get a little like aggressive in sharing their thoughts and meetings, and so maybe if like discussion is turning out more to going in the direction of an argument, maybe, for example.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. So I think there are several things that we can do as permaculture educators in a situation like that. The first, which might sound insignificant, but actually I think it's very significant, is, and I'll speak personally, is if I am well rested when a tense situation develops in a permaculture course, I'm so much more able to deal with it effectively. And I know that in my earlier teaching experience, I often had the tendency to stay up late at night preparing for the next day's sessions, thinking that, the more time I spent preparing, the better I would be as a teacher. But often that came at the cost of not getting enough sleep. So this sounds like a detail, but it for me it's really significant that if we are able to be well rested, it helps us to be more confident. Also, in order to deal with tense situations, it really, really fundamentally helps for we to be grounded within ourselves and confident within ourselves as a role of a facilitator. Now, I'll give an example of when I was not confident in a tense situation, because actually, I think one of the best ways to teach is to share mistakes or share when situations weren't handled as well as they could have, and then what I learned from that. So here's an example of probably my most challenging, or set note, my second most challenging experience as a facilitator. So it was my second time teaching being the lead teacher on a teacher training. And it was in a country with a culture that I wasn't very familiar with. And I had a co-teacher who was supposed to have prepared sessions based on Rosemary's manual and material, but he didn't. And instead, he would just show up right before the session and say, "Oh, I'm not prepared. I'm sorry. But look, why don't I just do dynamic exercises and energizers? And I'm sorry, you do the session because I'm not ready for it. But I'll do the people energizing part." And so this was how it was for the first 2 days. But the thing was, is that it was the beginning of the course, and there were people from really different cultures and countries. There were people from Scandinavia. There was a student from Palestine. There were people from the Balkans. Most of the people were from the Balkans, so Eastern Europe. There were some people also from Baltic states. So there were people from all over the place. And this teacher kept on the first day was having people do these kind of touchy-feely exercises and looking each other in the eyes, staring in each other's eyes, da da da. And his idea was to build community. But there was no preparation for how kind of deeply, quickly intimate people were expected to stare at each other in the eyes or give each other a hug or da da da. And so I was not confident enough yet to make an intervention on this teacher. So by the end of the second day, there was one student who completely flipped out and he was furious. And after dinner, he insisted that we get together and we have a talk all together, the participants and the teachers. And he was trembling with anger and rage. And he said, "I do not want to be forced to touch another man or be touched by another man. And I'm not going to be forced to stare into another man's eyes. And what is this? What's going on? Da, da, da." And I mean, he had a legitimate point. People didn't know each other even. So, some people might think, oh, he's just homophobic or whatever, but no, but like there was not the trust that was built to go into these kind of touchy-feely energizers. But I should have made an intervention beforehand before it got into it. So coming back to tense situations, how to deal with tense situations. Later at the end of the course was just so hard. At the end of the course, I invited people to give individual specific feedback to each of the teachers. And one piece of feedback that I got that was so useful, all it said was, hold the space, man. Hold the space, man. Hold the space. And what I understood immediately was how I was not grounded and confident enough in my role as a teacher to hold the space, meaning that when interventions needed to be made or things needed to be said, I didn't do them as I should have in my role as a teacher. Because really, as teachers, in a course like a permaculture course where people choose to take that course, they are giving us their consent to be the ones to make tough decisions about tense situations and how to handle them. And if we don't have the confidence to make those calls, and if instead we're paralyzed with indecision, as I was in that situation, things will go badly, for sure. So then again, another thing I want to say about tense situations is that one thing that Rosemary talks about is that teachers develop a natural authority. Successful, effective teachers, they develop and demonstrate what she calls a natural authority. Now, in non-formal education, there's no formal authority really that you're given, meaning you're not, you don't have the authority of the school system to discipline a student. You don't have the authority to tell them to go home to their parents or what have you. But what you can have is if you demonstrate, and surely this is something that you'll be working on in your training there. If you demonstrate the qualities of effective teachers and create trust with your students, then when tense situations occur, which they almost always will, almost every permaculture course will have some kind of tense situation. Maybe it's not serious. Maybe it's serious. But then with that natural authority and then the respect that people have for your role as the teacher, that's when with calmness and groundedness and fairness, you can make decisions. And it might be that you need to take a student aside in private and talk to them about their behavior. Maybe bring it back to a course culture that was agreed upon on the first day. It might be that in a session, you might have to make an intervention. If someone keeps on raising their hands and interrupting and talking on or talking off topic, you may have to say, if you're asking a question of the students, you might have to say, now, I'd like to hear from someone who hasn't talked already in this session, or something that shows that you want to hear from other people besides a person who's dominating this session. So here are some ideas about tense situations. But if you have other questions about challenging behaviors of students, I'm happy to try to give more specific information because boy, you'll experience them. They will. I mean, one would love to think, oh, we're all permaculturalists. No one's going to have a tense situation. Everyone's going to work together harmoniously. So, most of the time, that is true, but not always.
Okay, we've got a few minutes left, so I'll hand it to anyone who wants to ask more. Or if no one else has got questions, we could open up, as it sounds like Alfred's got more gold to share with us about challenging behaviors. I can see some nodding. Yeah. Is there anyone that's still waiting with a question? No. Okay, go for it, Alfred. Let's hear
Okay.
more.
Okay,
Alfred,
more.
Alfred, maximum 5 minutes, because I still have to give them their brief for their next micro teaching.
Okay, sounds good. So another learning experience for me was doing a teacher training, and in that training, one of the participants was a highly kinesthetic learner, meaning she really had to move in order to learn. And it reminded me of there's a story about a dancer named Isadora Duncan. And during the 1950s, when she was a girl, she was doing badly in school. And so the school ordered that her mother take her to a doctor to have her examined. So the doctor took Isadora Duncan, who became, one of the finest modern dancers in our time, in her time, so 1970s. The doctor examined her for 5 minutes, asked the mother to come back in, and said, Mrs. Duncan, your daughter is a dancer. There's nothing wrong with her, but she needs to move. And, a school trying to make her sit for 7 hours a day is not going to work for her. So likewise, in my teacher training, there was a student who just had to move. So what we tried to do as a teaching team was to create as much movement as possible. So every 15 minutes, we would try to change the teaching method so that people would get up and work in small groups. People would move into and do individual work. Then there would be a 15-minute chalk and talk. Then there would be some kind of design exercise. So we really did our best, and that helped. And actually people seeing that we were responsive to a student's learning what we would call multiple intelligence. Like she had one of her multiple intelligences was how she learned through her body and through movement. That actually helped at first to build confidence between the teachers and the rest of the students because they could see that we were being responsive to the needs of a student. But then that student, it just was never enough. It just never, because she was an extreme case of someone who had to move all the time. So then actually, it became such a challenging situation, and she was constantly raising her hand and telling us, "We have to go outside. We have to move. We have to do this." So I called Rosemary Morrow during the training and asked her, "What do we do about this situation?" And I explained it all, and she said, "The next time this happens, you can explain to the class that you have done what you could as a teaching team to accommodate the learning needs of one student. But at a certain point, you have to accommodate the needs of everyone else as well. And so what we can do as teachers in that case is to encourage students to look after their own learning needs as much as they can, while we as teachers will also do what we can to accommodate those needs as well." And actually, then this happened. The person said, "I want to go outside. We need to go outside." And the teachers, we actually just all stood up and said, "Look, this is the situation. This is the advice we've gotten from Rosemary. We're going to do our best to accommodate your needs. And we ask that you do your best to accommodate the needs of everyone else." And actually, that pretty much solved the problem. So instead of us getting in conflict with her in front of the whole class or even privately, we had a process that was transparent and that actually, I think, really brought the group closer when it actually could have had the opposite effect. It really could have led to more conflict and fracture. Jen, was that within 5 minutes?
Yes, that was
Yeah.
very well done. Okay, that was amazing. Thank you so much, Alfred.
Great. Well, thank you. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, maybe, yeah, thank you. Yeah, if everyone wants to wave and yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so much respect to Jen for doing this course. And this is how we want to be as permaculture educators. Each one teach one. This is how we build our permaculture movement. So it was great. It was great working with Jen when she was a participant, and now it's great working with her as a colleague permaculture educator.
So who here is going to be next? The next one up.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you so much.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.